welcome to Sustainable Solutions with Planet Aid, the podcast that delves deep into the most pressing issues facing our planet and communities today. Join us every week as we embark on a journey of discovery, hope, and change. Please don't forget to like this episode, share it with colleagues, and most important, hit that subscribe button. And now I'm turning it over to your host, Monica Johnson, Planet Aid's communication and content specialist and podcaster extraordinaire. I'll rejoin the conversation for some follow-up questions after Monica's interview.
All right. Thank you, Haley. And we are going to catch up with you a little bit later. Welcome to Sustainable Solutions with Planet Aid. I'm Monica Johnson, and I'm going to be your guide for this journey as we take critical sustainability challenges and try to simplify them. And it's also an opportunity to learn from incredible individuals like our guest today and organizations at the forefront of developing and implementing sustainable solutions to these very issues. So we're all about the solutions on this podcast. So we thank you for joining us. Today, we're going to be talking to Cali Nolan. And Cali and her husband are the owners of Long Lake Farms in Coahoma, Mississippi. And as a cotton farmer, she is a champion for regenerative farming, which we're going to be talking about a little bit today. So hello, Cali. Welcome.
Hello. Thank you so much for having me.
You know, I wanted to just say I was so excited when I got a chance to see you talking at the Regenerative Agriculture and Textile Summit, and you just were so passionate. So I'm excited to have you on our show today. So tell me a little bit about yourself, Cali, and how you came to regenerative farming.
Yes, well, my father was a cotton farmer, and to be honest, growing up, I did not have much interest in his farming. But then as adults, my husband decided that he wanted to join my dad on the farm. And as my dad retired, he took over most of the management of the farm. And then about 3 or 4 years ago, we had 3 young children at the time. Mark and I sold our house in town and decided to move out to the farmhouse on the farm headquarters. And it wasn't long after that, I personally started to encounter a lot of health issues. So bad that I ended up having to quit my job and just really focus on my health and taking care of my children. And in the meantime, you know, we did find out that the main source of that was a mold issue that we had in the crawl space of our old farmhouse. But it just ignited a lot of health issues for me that could not be solved by traditional doctors. No one I went to really had good answers. And so I ended up going to a functional medicine doctor and really taking a very natural approach. And part of that was really thinking about my environment and the toxins and all of that we were experiencing. In the meantime, I did a deep dive into health, natural health, and I kept hearing this word, regenerative agriculture, as I'm listening to all of these people talking about health. And it really ignited just an interest in me. So I ended up really digging into what does that look like? And I started to bug my husband, I think we should do this on our farm. And he was looking at me like I was crazy, like there was no way that was going to happen. So in the meantime, we ended up going to a regenerative ag conference and getting connected to some consultants there, and they introduced us to Citizens of Humanity, the clothing group, and they had started a regenerative cotton farming program, introducing farmers into regenerative ag and just kind of really having them jump in with a lot of support. They provided a ton of support to make it easy for farmers to get in. So with that, my husband, Mark, was convinced that, you know, it was an okay thing to do with all of that support. And so we have been farming that way the last few years, and it's just been awesome. It's been great for us and has just opened up a lot of opportunities for us, and it's just fun to talk.
So tell me, what was the turning point as far as, you know, what kind of won your husband over in kind of hearing about regenerative agriculture?
before we came into contact with Citizens of Humanity, there were all these principles that really made sense. And we had already started with cover crops and with no-till on some of our land and felt pretty good about that. But really, the turning point to jump in wholeheartedly with, the biological inputs and with really testing and monitoring everything very closely was that Citizens of Humanity, the way that they support their farmers, they do two things. For one thing, they offer a premium above the market price of cotton, which obviously was very attractive to my husband, who we're always trying to make ends meet. So that sounded good. And then they also paid for a lot of the inputs that were new to us that we had never used before. And so for him, being a typical provider of the family, a lot of it was about economics for him. He just wanted to make sure that the risks that we were taking, made sense for our family and that we weren't going to lose the farm over it. So I think that the economics of it was really the turning point for him.
So I'm going to go a different direction and ask you a little bit about your land. As a farmer and a person who has grown up on a farm, what's special about your land and your farm in Mississippi?
Well, I think the most notable thing for us, since we have moved out here to the farm, is that for us, it's extremely personal. It's, right here in our backyard, we have cotton fields. In our front yard, we have Long Lake, which the farm is named after. We have all types of wildlife living on the lake. Right now, the fields are completely covered with snow geese because we have snow for once. It's very rare in Mississippi. But just being every day when we wake up and we look out a window, we really feel the connection of the way that we steward our land is connected to the natural landscape around us, wildlife, and also living right here. You realize that the way you steward your land really affects our own personal health and the environment that we're creating for our children. Our children are out in the cotton fields playing and jumping on cotton bales and all of that. So you really begin to really think about what you're doing when you're so up close and personal.
And it's so funny because I saw some of your social media with your children on these big bales of cotton, really cute and very fun to see. And I can't imagine that's just a wonderful way to grow up, so connected to the land. So today we're talking about regenerative agriculture. How do you define regenerative agriculture? And what are some of the strategies that you use to achieve it? And I know we're talking a little bit about no-till and cover crops. Can you go into that a little bit for us?
I think at the core, when you really boil it down, what does it mean to regenerate? And I think, for me, I see that as creating or restoring life into places where life has been degraded. And so a lot of the conversation in regenerative agriculture is around restoring life and health to soils. But even larger than that, I think it has a larger implication to restoring health of ecosystems, to restoring health of communities, of people, and even like in the textile business, to restoring health to supply chains that we can get into a little bit later. But yeah, for sure, and the farming aspect of it, there's so much education that we have just loved. We feel like we're back in school again, and I love to learn new things. And so as a conventional farmer, there's a lot of people just advise you and tell you what to do, and you do it. And there's not a ton of digging deep into the science and the biology of what's going on in your fields. And so for regenerative ag, the focus is on restoring the soil health. Believe it or not, there is so much life going on underneath the soil that you don't see. There's bacteria and fungi, and there is a whole ecosystem going on down there that as farmers, we have the ability to create a environment where that life thrives, and then in turn the soil health affects the plant health, and then the plant health can affect the rest of the ecosystem around you. So let's see, the practices that are very important to regenerative ag, like we mentioned before. Keeping the soil covered is a big tenet, just making sure that you are protecting the soil, and that comes a lot of times in the form of cover crops. So after we harvest our cotton in the fall, actually, we plant the seed before we harvest the cotton. We fly in the seed before we even harvest. And then so as soon as we're taking that crop out of the field, we have a cover crop growing up to protect the soil. Minimal disturbance is another one. So for us, that looks like no-till, and that is allowing that community of bacteria and fungi that I was talking about. When you give it space to grow and you're not coming in with tillage that breaks it up and kills those communities, it gets healthier and healthier. Let's see, there's also similar to the keeping the ground covered is just always having living roots in the ground. And, over the winter, as we have these cover crops, those different types of plants that we planted in the field are fixing nitrogen and other nutrients in the soil that allow us to use less inputs in the spring and summer when our crops are growing. They're putting that health into the soil naturally.
Let me ask you a question about the cover crops. Now, what kind of cover crops would you use? I know that you're doing cotton as your main source of farming. So what kind of cover crops are being put down?
So yes, another tenet of regenerative ag is diversity. And so for us, we get a lot of that diversity when we put in our cover crop mix. So it's not just one type of seed, it's a mix. And all the different types of seeds that we put out are doing different jobs. So for us, we put out a cereal rye that does a great job of fixing nitrogen. We also put out legumes, which hairy vetch is one of those. Also, same thing, legumes are great at fixing nitrogen. And then we have tillage radishes, which go down and their roots are really breaking up that soil underground to help with the compaction so that there's more space down there. The other function that cover crops do is they act like a sponge. And so when the rains come all throughout the winter, instead of all of that water running off and also pulling off erosion, the soil with it, it acts like a sponge and it keeps that water in the soil, and the cotton is able to access that later.
Good. So connecting this theme to textiles, when it comes to cotton, we know it's a resource intensive crop. So how can we make it regenerative? And I'm guessing that some of these things that you just said kind of covers that, but is that pretty much the gist of it?
Well, sure. I think that all of the things that I've been referring to, plus other things, there's animal integration that we haven't quite gotten there yet, but we're trying to. But all of the principles of soil health are all working together, and the result of that is a decrease in your inputs. So there are less synthetic fertilizers and less chemicals. And so, one of the things, actually the first principle of soil health is actually context. And so knowing where you are starting in regenerative ag is really important to know. This is where we are, and then this is the goal of getting to where we want to go. And so to realize, okay, we are starting with a resource intensive crop, but what is the way to get away from that? And the way to get away from that is these principles. So in the first couple of years that Mark and I started doing this, we were shocked and amazed at the drastic decrease in all of those inputs that we were able to achieve in just a few years. To be honest, we didn't trust it that much. We didn't think it was going to be that fast. Most people say 3 to 4 years is what you need to really get established. And, when the plants get healthier, they're able to be more resistant to insects and to fungal diseases. And, in the farming community, that's kind of hard to believe, but yeah, that was our experience for sure.
When you're starting something like this, is there a level of anxiety? Is this going to work? How is
Yes.
how is it afford for
Yes.
this to fail, this kind of thing?
Right. Yes, absolutely. And, with my husband and I, we have kind of a relationship. I'm the idealist and the dreamer, and let's go for it. And he's the realist, making sure that everyone's going to be taken care of. And, so for me, really, whenever we got into this, I was going, let's do it. And he was going, okay, here's the reality. This is, if we don't spray chemicals, our whole crop will be eaten up by plant bugs. It's just the reality of where we live. So yes, I think that there is definitely an anxiety. So much of the anxiety, I think, comes from the fact that no one around us is doing it. So if no one is doing it, you think, well, someone would be doing it if this worked. And, it seems like it's not possible. So yes, there's that. And then there's also, like we were saying, I think whenever it was harvest time and it was time to go out there and harvest the cotton, we were really holding our breath because, we could tell it looked like a pretty crop, but you don't know until you get out there and you find out what the yield was. And we were so pleasantly surprised that really all of this came together and did not affect the yield or the quality of the cotton at all. And we were able to, like you said, decrease all of those inputs and just see so many benefits so quickly. But yes, there's a lot of different reasons why there's a lot of anxiety going into it. And like I mentioned before, without the economical support that we were able to get through the program, it's just hard to change from something that's working for you economically if you don't have a good support system or an economic reason for it. So
let me ask you a question about the seed that you use. Can you talk about GMO or genetically modified seeds in relation to regenerative agriculture? And you prefer GMO versus non-GMO seeds, and what are companies asking you for?
Yes, this is a topic that we are having conversations about right now. And we have some contacts. We have some friends who are cotton farmers in Greece. And obviously in Europe, they're all using non-GMO seed. And it's working for them. I do think, on their farms, there's usually a lot smaller scale farm than what's in the U.S., and the climate is very different than ours. And so for us, we know that people are talking about non-GMO cotton in the U.S., but we have not seen it done very much at all. It's a very new idea, and I think something that people are wanting to experiment with and to see how that would go on a larger scale farm. There's a couple of issues. I mean, there's numerous issues with it just because it's so different than the way that cotton is farmed right now. So for us, we hear brands and companies asking the question, is it a possibility to use non-GMO seed in cotton? And our answer is we're happy to try. We're up for experimenting, and especially on a small scale. We're very adventurous farmers, and we like to kind of challenge the status quo and see what's possible. And I think that when you approach it that way, when you say, hey, we've got 5 acres over here that we can experiment with this year and see how it goes, and if it goes well, expand the next year. But for us, there's not a lot of availability of non-GMO seed in the U.S., and there's not a lot of people who are doing it to kind of help us along with figuring that out. So it might be something that's coming along. I don't know. We'll see.
you work with brands who are doing clothing. So one of the things that I love when you were talking at the summit was you were talking about the fact that people might want you to do certain things regeneratively, but there's no saying, hey, let me help you with that as far as the brands, because if your crop fails, then, nobody's there to pick you up. So tell me a little bit about that as far as the expectations that the brands may have and the reality of what is being paid for,
Farming is an interesting topic because I think in some circles, farmers can be looked at as, they're part of the problem, spraying chemicals and, really not being environmentally friendly at all. But then also recently there's been a new narrative that has said, hey, actually, farming is one of the very few industries that can really make a difference in this, in the climate crisis. It's one of the few industries that has the ability to actually reverse the damage by drawing down carbon and sequestering it into the soil if done in the correct way. So I think sometimes in that conversation, I think people jump to, okay, we expect all farmers to, be farming this way, and it's just a fact, and they should all be doing it. And there's no support or realization of what that actually takes for farmers, or the anxiety involved with changing things up drastically from what you've been doing before. And so, so I definitely think in some ways we see some brands who hear, okay, regenerative is a buzzword now, and we see the value of regenerative agriculture, and we want to be part of that. We want to associate with that, but we don't want to, put any skin in the game. For us, we just want to put a label on this t-shirt and say it's regenerative, but we don't want to pay a premium. We don't want to personally work with the farmers. We just want to use it for our benefit, right? So, I think that it really takes the visionaries, the brands who really, truly care about the climate issue. And they see that in order to make this happen, you can't just throw standards on farmers and expect them to change everything up for no reason. And I think that like brands like Citizens of Humanity and some other brands that have been leaders in this area have seen, okay, if we want to do this, it's got to be teamwork, right? We have to work together. We have to support each other. We have to listen to the farmers when they say, hey, we would love to do that, but if we do that, we're going to lose our whole crop and we won't have any cotton to give you, so we're going to have to take, baby steps, or we're going to have to take one step at a time in getting to the place where we want to go. And I think for that, just like I mentioned, Citizens has been able to do with us. It is providing support. It's providing Citizens partners with Advancing Eco Agriculture, which does consulting and also provides inputs for us. And in order to be successful, that's a lot of support that farmers need. And, Citizens has been able to do that for us. So, I think that brands have to realize that it's going to take collaboration. It's going to take listening to each other and supporting each other if we all really want to get to this goal that, of course, everyone wants. We want to see this transformation in the climate and in agriculture.
Become an advocate for this. You going to this the Textile Summit, the Regenerative Agriculture Textile Summit, as well as some of the other places that you've been going, kind of shouting from the rooftops the value of regenerative agriculture. So, one of the things that I noticed about that particular conference is that there were so many different people in the room, which I think is probably a necessary thing. There's There were government officials. There were people from cotton advisory committees. There were, textile brands. And then there were farmers. So what's the value? What's the value in a meeting like that?
It's so valuable to me. I mean, whenever the opportunity popped up, I said, Mark, we have to prioritize this because, I think that one of the issues for the textile supply chains as it currently is that there is so much disconnect, that there's so many brands, buying fabrics and materials and products that they really are not sure where they came from. They're really not sure, what the background was, and they surely have no idea who the farmer was that grew the cotton, except in very rare cases. I mean, that's just almost unheard of in the textile industry right now. And so to get in the room, especially with some large brands, global brands that were there in the same room, I knew that one of the ways that you restore health to systems is that you engage in real relationships with people. And so for me, while I was there, I just kind of blindly went up to people I knew were in brands, and I said, hey, if you ever want some regenerative cotton, call me, and it opened up conversations that, who would know this, cotton farmers from Mississippi could be having conversations with these global brands. And that those brands are looking at us going, I really value this conversation also, that they are trying to do what's right and they really want to make a difference. And if they don't have the relationship all the way down with the farmer, it's pretty hard to make a difference, So I think, one of my main goals now, experiencing this great partnership, is I really want to expand these opportunities for more farmers. And once more farmers see regenerative cotton bringing in a premium, they're going to want to change. They're going to follow that. They're going to see, wow, you're selling your cotton directly to these large brands, and they, it's paying off. Hopefully it'll, start a movement that, people in our area and beyond, all in the United States, will feel like I'm totally behind if I'm not growing regenerative cotton. That's where we need to be.
One of the things that about your background is that at Long Lake Farms, you're very acquainted with being on a farm and farm life, in this life. But your focus is marketing and sustainability. So talk about the necessity of these types of business roles in the farming industry. And you were really just kind of talking about that just a minute ago.
Yeah. The reality is that Mark is very busy with growing cotton. That is his job. And there is not a lot of extra time left over for him to also then, be in contact with people about selling the cotton and being on phone calls all the time, explaining what we're doing. So I think that whenever I came in and really started, working full time for the farm, he recognized that this was a huge asset for him to have a partner who was making the connections, reaching out, and, spreading the word about regenerative cotton, and bringing in those relationships so that we were able to grow more regenerative cotton and to sell more to brands. It's a full-time job for sure. And, as we've gotten more into it, we've recognized more and more opportunities to represent other farmers who don't have time to do this kind of work too. So we're kind of, we're getting together with other farmers who want to do this and making a plan for, how we can help them also get access, personal access to brands. But yeah, I think it's incredibly important. And I think the reality is that for most farmers, they grow cotton and then they sell the cotton at whatever the market price is. And they're not asking any questions. That's just how it is. That's what everyone else does. And I don't think that they really see that as an option for themselves. So yet again, I hope we can be an example to say, yeah, we have a voice in this.
Right. Just helping farmers to be savvy about their decisions and not just taking whatever the first price is for whatever the bale is.
For
Right.
sure. Right.
So I read a quote from farmprogress.com and it states, from you, for whatever reason, people are really into understanding what we do. We farmers need to be the ones answering their questions. And I found that quote very interesting because I, again, attended that summit and you laid out that compelling argument for what needs to happen with regenerative agriculture and the demands for eco-friendly products and how they're grown. So my first question to you is, what are the requests from the designers and others in the textile industry? And I guess I'll just also ask you with that, are the demands reasonable?
Yes. Honestly, I think that brands are still trying to figure out what they want to ask for and what is realistic and reasonable. And so in that case, I do think that it's extremely valuable that they're having conversations directly with farmers instead of coming up with their own ideas. I think at the end of the day, the value in regenerative cotton, as well as other regenerative agricultural commodities, is that brands want to be part of the conversation and the solution that they are saying our products are sequestering more carbon than they are admitting. Therefore, this is a product that is earth friendly, and you should buy this because you care about the climate, right? And so I think obviously it's vital for farmers to be part of this conversation, because as much as they want to, they can consult with scientists and come up with plans and all of that, but we all know that, it's easier to be said than done, and that the reality is that, you have to take a theory and then you have to go out into the field and you have to test it, and then you have to see if it works, and then you have to do the soil test, you have to take the measurements, and you have to see, are we really doing this? And it has to be the literal boots in the field figuring out, how are we going to do this? And I think that we're still, like I said, I think that everyone's still in the process of figuring out exactly what that looks like, and the standards and the certifications that go along with that. So I think that the farmer's voice, it has to be in the front if we're going to be doing it right.
And that goes right along with my next question. Are farmers heard when it comes to cotton farming, or do the companies bend it all to the knowledge and the wisdom of generational farmers? They have a lot of wisdom to give. So do you feel like they are heard when they're in the room?
I think that the brands who are actually doing the most good, they are listening to the farmers, and they have come to realize that, like I said before, that's the only way that they're going to make progress in this. I think for the brands who haven't realized that yet, they're still standing on the sideline, because they have not figured out how to really jump in and invest. And honestly, I think they're just waiting on other people to figure it out, and then they're going to follow. But hopefully for those brands that are being the visionaries and the leaders, hopefully that will benefit them in the long run, and people will see the value in that, of people who had a vision and invested early, even whenever, there were a lot of questions still around. That's the type of people that I want to support, and the types of clothes that I want to buy is those people who have that passion.
Question, just in your opinion, would it be valuable for companies to decide to lower the quantity of cotton that they are getting and pay that premium for what they need, because that's all a part of like fast fashion, these big lines, and then some of them it ends up going to a landfill because maybe that line isn't
Mm-hmm.
isn't received as well, and then they end up burning
Yes,
it or whatever it may be. There's a lot of things that go
for
on in
sure.
the textile industry.
Mm-hmm.
So
Yeah. Well, for one thing, I don't pretend to be an expert in the textile industry. I am learning a lot. So, but definitely, from an outside perspective, I do agree with you that that seems to be a large issue. And, it seems as though the smaller brands who don't produce this huge mass amount, that they do have more flexibility to incorporate things like this because a few cents paying extra is not just going to tank the whole company. And I think that, yeah, if people, I don't know how that works. I don't pretend to know how that works for a large company. If they could cut down on the waste, that would be, obviously that would be great for sure.
yeah, your
Yeah.
reaction. Science, lab testing, and data when it comes to being considered regenerative cotton. Can you talk about the metrics used to measure how regenerative a farm is?
I think that the best metrics are a combination of measuring the practices that the farmers are implementing on their farm, and then they're also measuring the outcomes of those practices. So I think the reason why it's important to include both is because of what we talked about context. And so there is so much difference in every single farm, even in our farm compared to our neighbor's farm. There's different soil, there's different things happening. And so, the first step is, for farmers to learn the practices and to start implementing them on their farm. So that's, I think that's the first step. And I do think that farmers should get, credit for that, because it's not easy to change your practices and to start to implementing this whole new way of farming. But obviously, at some point you have to say, okay, then you have to measure, are those practices producing the outcomes that everyone is looking for? And so with that, we have done very intensive soil testing, and we do tissue samples and sap analysis from our plants. And some of that is actually done so that we know what nutrients to apply at the right time, so we're not over applying inputs, synthetic fertilizers, those types of things. So some of that helps us decrease that. But over the long run, over a series of years, obviously everyone is looking for, are you storing more carbon than you're emitting? That's where everyone is looking to go, obviously. And so I think that, you have to combine those two things so that farmers are helped along the way to be reaching the goals that everyone wants.
Is standardization of regenerative agriculture even possible?
From what I understand about the groups who are doing the certifications, I feel that almost every group who's doing it understands that, that they all know that everyone's starting with a different context. And if we're going to make progress, we have to acknowledge that in the first place and then move from there. So I do think that the certifications that are coming about, I think that there are definitely some that are looking at it in the correct way, and it still is able to push the farmers to start where you are and then to progress. There's a lot of people who say, regeneration, it's not a destination, it's a journey. And all of us in all of our life can continually become more and more regenerative. And so, I don't think that there's ever a moment that you're going to say, and now my farm is perfectly regenerative and we have nowhere else to go. It's always going to be, something that you can, learn more and do more in that context. But yeah, there has to be something that says this is regenerative and this is not, and this is your goal of getting there. And obviously that's very important in terms of getting premiums for the products from regenerative farms. And, ultimately, I think the public needs to have a standard where they're able to say in their mind, this is something that I trust. And, this is trustworthy enough for me to choose this product over another product because, this is reliable and basically kind of, acceptable from a national or global perspective. So I do think it's an important and very important thing that we have to get to. And honestly, I think we're on the way. I think we're not far away from that. There's a lot of work being done, and I think it'll come around soon for sure.
Is that one of the things that's being looked at in the Farm Bill?
Yes, it is. It's very interesting studying the Farm Bill. It encompasses so many things, including nutrition. But yes, obviously it affects farmers in a large way. And there's been a lot of push in the last few years really to incorporate incentives for regenerative agriculture into the Farm Bill. And, it keeps getting pushed back a little bit further. And, they say we're still working on it and we're all anxiously awaiting what is actually going to come out of that. But I think that there's been great work done around that. I don't personally exactly know what the details around that would be. Right now there's some national incentive programs that will give farmers extra funding for not necessarily being labeled as regenerative ag, but basically incorporating those practices, and then you get incentives for that, like EQIP and CSP from NRCS. And to my knowledge, those programs are maxed out every year, and there's like way more farmers applying for that funding than they can fund. And so I think that's a great point, that if you incentivize something, people want to do it. And there's obviously a desire for farmers and a willingness for farmers to change those practices. And so, I think kind of going back to my initial point, if there's an economic incentive, that's a way to get people to change, so I think that I really hope that will be incorporated.
In your opinion, why does stewardship matter? In the farmprogress.com article, your husband, Mark, says, instead of thinking of inheriting this farm from my wife's family, I think about it as borrowing the land from the next generation. So how does viewing yourself as a steward of the land instead of an owner impact your approach to farming and taking care of the land?
I do think that farmers, almost all farmers, they love the land and that they want to do what's best for the land. I think that sometimes there is a lack of education about, what is the best for soil health and for long-term health, and how our farming is situated into the whole ecosystem around us, the health of people, the health of communities. And so, I think that instead of looking at our farm as solely this is a source of money and of income, and we're just going to do whatever we need to get that out of it. I think when you look at it with a more holistic view, realizing that we're an important part of how this whole system is working together, and then you look at your children and you realize, I really hope that the way that we are stewarding this land provides something that is a legacy for them that they could continue on, not only just providing for their family, but being an important part of the way that this whole nature is connected to people and how we're all working together for really flourishing, not just to survive, but to flourish.
Kelly, thank you so much. It's been a great conversation. So what we're going to do is we're going to pull our communications manager from Planet 8, Haley, back into the conversation just to get a few takeaways from what we've discussed already.
Yeah, just kind of a couple follow-ups. I'm really curious what you noticed just individually in your family when you made the switch to regenerative agriculture. You kind of talked about some health issues that motivated it. I'm just wondering what you've seen. I know you were talking about more growth in terms of the microbiome and that sort of thing. Just personal impact on your family.
I think that it's hard to tell for our family, for myself and for our family. We definitely have made a turnaround, and everyone is for sure more healthy. Like I said, I think the source of that a lot was the mold that was in our crawl space that we addressed, and were able to mitigate that. But I think that for me, I think that really looking at as a whole the environment that we are in and our kids are in, and the toxins that come into that, um, just being aware of that and being aware of, what we eat and the air that we breathe and the water that we drink all affects our health. And when you have a health crisis, that becomes very apparent. So I don't know if I can 100% say that there are direct benefits yet, but I think for me personally, I just see a future where all of those things are drastically decreased for the flourishing of our family who live out here. And like I said, the community and the wildlife and all of that.
Has given you it's caused you to sort of step back and see that as a piece of your environment that's impacting you, and then you look at all the different pieces that are impacting you. Very interesting. I'm just wondering if it seems like the story for regenerative agriculture is a very good one. You're a great case study. And I'm just wondering, are there prevailing misconceptions or myths that your case study sort of disproves? What are you seeing there? And then, what messages are you seeing that are effective in persuading other farmers to give it a try?
Like I said, at the beginning, whenever we first started discussing this, it felt like it was pretty impossible, that it was not an option for us, that it was too much of a risk to uproot everything that had been working so far and to change up everything. And so hopefully we are a case study that you can do this, and that it can create many, many good things and opportunities, far outweighing the risk that you take getting into this.
And that leads right into my last questions here. I think, like you said, there's these programs that incentivize it, and clearly those are popular and working. There's not enough. And so obviously the next step in that is making sure that brands pay the premium and are incentivizing farmers to do that. And so if you take another step there, then that's really ultimately the consumer's attitude. Right. And the consumer demand, because that's what's going to motivate the brands. So I'm just wondering if you're seeing trends in that consumption and demand. Are consumer attitudes evolving? Is demand for regenerative cotton growing? And then, obviously, is more consumer education needed? I think the obvious answer is yes. There's never quite enough, but I'm just kind of wondering how you're seeing that evolve.
I think the great thing is that you for sure can start dipping your toe in, and start to realize, okay, cover crops are great. Then we'll try out no-till, and okay, we can do this, and then little by little get into it. And hopefully, like I said, our goal is to increase that brand demand for regenerative cotton. And then hopefully our message is, hey, don't you want a premium? If you want a premium, you need to do these things. And that's the big incentive for sure.
And that was going to be my last question, but it just made me think of one more, your answer there, and the scalability. Do you see the regenerative practices as more scalable than some of the organic practices or requirements?
Like I said, the limitations with organic, it's just the pest pressure and the weed pressure in certain areas are just so intense that it's very difficult for someone to jump to, zero chemicals immediately. But the cool thing is that with regenerative ag, when you start implementing these practices, you see that possibility start to open up, because all of a sudden these practices are creating this health in the soil and the plants that you never thought were there. So yes, I definitely think that the potential for scaling it is way larger. And I think that's why there's a lot of excitement around it, because that can be what really makes a difference for the planet, as if, if everyone is starting to implement these things.
All right. Well, thank you, Cali, for coming on. We really appreciate all this wonderful information that you've given to us today. We're not farmers, so we get a little bit more clarification on things like this, but we really want to know, because it's all about that supply chain and understanding where we're getting our cotton and other products from. So thank you again for kind of giving us that clarification on that. And thank you, everyone, for joining us for this episode of Sustainable Solutions with Planet 8. And we hope you've been inspired by the ideas we've explored today. And we encourage you to search for sustainable solutions you can pursue, so you can be a good steward in your neck of the woods and beyond. Haley?
All right. Thank you, Cali. Thank you, Monica. A few reminders for our listeners on the way out. If you want to stay connected with us and stay informed about the latest sustainable solutions, don't forget to subscribe to our podcast, and please share it with your friends, family, and colleagues. Together, we can make a difference. And remember, change starts with awareness and action. So let's keep the conversation going. Feel free to reach out to us on social media, through our website. Share your thoughts, ideas, and stories with us. We'd love to hear from you. Until next time, remember, it's a big world out there, but every small change counts. Together, we can build a better, more sustainable future. Thank you all so much.